Oh my goodness, Tim. I have so many of those stories, so many, and they all are very important to me. I'm the enemy. I'm the black guy. This is the head of the Klan, right? And the bodyguard had his hand back on his gun, looking at both of us like, what did either one of y'all just do? I had no idea what this man was going to do. And he can make up his mind right then and there what he wants to do. Does he want to sit down and do the interview? Does he want to walk away? Does he want to try to kill me? I don't know. All right, but I'm willing to take that chance. So the only thing I knew for sure was what I was going to do. I have respectable civil conversations with people. And what I've noticed is this. Unfortunately, we cannot cure stupidity, all right? So, there are people who are ignorant and there are people who are stupid. So let's work with the ignorant people because we can fix that, all right?
First of all, this is my voice. I'm Tim Green, and I have ALS. But this podcast isn't about ALS. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for me. I'm a father of 5, married for over 35 years, a New York Times best-selling author, an NFL first-round pick, and a practicing attorney. This is Nothing Left Unsaid, where my son Troy and I sit down with extraordinary people for raw, honest conversations about life, its toughest trials, and greatest triumphs. My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. Daryl Davis, you have one of the most interesting stories I've ever heard. It's one of those the truth is stranger than fiction types of lives. You started out as a musician, but then transcended the music world and became something much more. You became an agent for change with the most powerful anti-racist activism that I have ever heard of. Before we get into your background, can you please tell the story from your book about your experience playing in Frederick, Maryland?
Sure, I'll be glad to, and thank you very much for those very, very kind words. Well, I'm age 67. I'm from Chicago originally, and I was the child of parents in the U.S. Foreign Service. So I spent a lot of my formative years, in fact, most of my formative years, traveling around the world, living in countries. My father worked for the American Embassy in these countries. So starting in 1961, at the age of 3, I began traveling all over the world. And my first introduction to school was abroad. How it works is you get assigned to a country for 2 years, and then at the end of the assignment, you return back home here to the States. You're here perhaps for a few months, or maybe even a year, and then you're back abroad again. So my first introduction to school was abroad. I did kindergarten, first grade, third grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, all in different schools in different countries. Now here is the interesting thing. My classmates in those schools abroad were from all over the world. Anybody who had an embassy where we had our American embassy, all of their kids went to the same school. So that became my baseline for what school was supposed to be. This little girl sitting right here at this desk, she might have been from Czechoslovakia. This boy over here might have been from Japan. That kid from Nigeria. This kid behind me from France. Just a plethora of different nationalities. That was my norm. That was my world. However, every time I would return home here to my own country, I would either be in all black schools or black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. And there was not the amount of diversity that I had overseas. So you could say that literally, when I was abroad, I was living 10 years ahead of my time into the future, because that multicultural society, that diversity, had yet to come to the classrooms in our country. So one time it did come, and it was 1968, 10 years later after I was born. Even though desegregation was passed in 1954, 4 years before I was born, schools did not integrate overnight. It took years and years. So 1968, I'm in 4th grade. We'd just come back, and I was one of 2 black children in the entire school. Myself in 4th grade, a little black girl in 2nd grade. And so consequently, all of my friends were white. And some of my fourth grade friends were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join. So I joined. I was the only black scout anywhere in the area. And we had a parade in which I participated with the Cub Scouts, the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Brownies, 4-H Club, and different organizations. People were smiling and waving and cheering during this parade until we reached a certain point at which I began getting hit with our bottles and soda pop cans and various small debris from the street by just a small group of the spectators over on the sidewalk. Having had no precedent for this type of behavior, my first thought was, oh, these people over here, they don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was. It wasn't, and well, I had no reason to think otherwise, right? So
how would you know?
So it wasn't, until my scout leaders came running and covered over me with their own bodies and quickly, guided me out of the danger, that I realized no other scouts were getting this special protection. So now I'm wondering, what had I done? I didn't do anything. Why are they doing this to me? And I asked them, and them being the scout leaders, I asked them, I said, why are they doing this? And all they would do is kind of shush me and rush me along, tell me to keep moving, everything will be okay. I kept moving. They never answered my question. So when I got home, my mother and father, who could not attend the parade, they had something else going on, they were cleaning me up and putting Band-Aids on me and asking me, how did you fall down and get all scraped up? I told them I didn't fall down. I told them what had happened. For the first time in my life, my mother and father sat me down at the age of 10 and explained to me what racism was. I never even heard the word racism. Seriously, at the age of 10, I had no clue what they were talking about. Why would I? I've been around the world. I've been around people from all over the world, and nobody of any color had ever treated me like that. What my parents were saying made no sense. My 10-year-old brain could not process the idea that someone who had never seen me, someone who had never spoken with me, who knew nothing about me, would want to hurt me for no other reason than this, the color of my skin. It made no sense. My parents had to be wrong. And to prove that they were wrong and I was right, I pointed out the fact that the people over here on the sidewalk who were doing this to me did not look any different than my friends from school or my fellow Cub Scouts or my little friends overseas, whether they were my fellow Americans at the embassy or my little French or Danish or Swedish or Australian friends. They looked just like those people over there on the sidewalk. So color had nothing to do with it. My parents assured me that it did. Well, I didn't believe them, but this was 1968. And on April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated. I remember it very, very well. Every major city in this country burned to the ground with violence and destruction, all in the name of this new word I had learned called racism. So now I understood that these people, these racist people, do exist. And I accepted that, but I didn't know why. My parents had not lied to me. They told me the truth. I just didn't know, and now I know. But I didn't understand, why are people racist? So at the age of 10, I formed a question in my mind, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And I've been looking for the answer to that question. All right, so that's the background. Now, fast forward. I've graduated high school. I graduated college. My profession is music, but my obsession is trying to improve race relations. So I had joined a country band, and it was an all-white band. They were well established here in the Maryland area, and I was the only black person in the band, and usually the only black person where the band would play. They had played a place in Maryland here, in a town called Frederick, Maryland. Frederick, Maryland sits about an hour and 20 minutes north of Washington, D.C. There was a bar there called the Silver Dollar Lounge. And the Silver Dollar Lounge had a reputation, which I knew about. I'd never been there, but, the reputation preceded it. It was not welcoming to black people. There were no signs like, you've seen in your history books, colored drinking water fountain or colored restroom or whites only. Nothing like that. It just had that unspoken reputation. So black people didn't go there. Well, here I am in the Silver Dollar Lounge with this band. And people looked at me. Nobody bothered me. But they looked at me. And we did our set. And on the break, I'm following the band to go sit down when I feel somebody from behind put their arm across my shoulder. Now, I don't know anybody in this joint, right? So I'm turning around trying to see who's touching me, getting ready to defend myself if I have to. And I see a white gentleman, perhaps 15, maybe even 20 years older than me. Big smile on his face. And he says, "Man, I sure love your all's music." I said, "Thank you." I shook his hand. And he points at the stage and says, "I've seen this here band before, but I ain't never seen you before. Where'd you come from?" I said, "Well, man, I just joined the band. I'm happy you're here. I'm happy you like the music." He says, "Man, I love your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis." Now, this was not offensive to me. I mean, it was complimentary, but I was surprised that given the fact that this guy was, a decade or a decade and a half, maybe even 2 decades older than me, that he did not know the black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's piano style. And I proceeded to tell him that I got it from the same place Jerry Lee did, from black blues and boogie-woogie piano players. This is where that rock and roll, rockabilly style evolved. "Oh, no, I ain't never seen no black man play like that, except for you." I said, "Look, man, I know Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a good friend of mine. He told me himself where he learned how to play." He did not believe me, this guy. But he was so fascinated with me, he insisted that I come back to his table and let him buy me a drink. Now, I don't drink alcohol. I never did. And I went back to his table. I let him buy me a cranberry juice or something. He pays the waitress, and then he takes his glass and he clinks my glass and cheers me and says, "This is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man." Now I'm totally mystified, because at that point in my life, right, I had sat down with tens of thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation. How was it that this guy, that much older than me, had never sat down with a black person before? It was baffling. So I asked him, I said, "Why?" And I wasn't trying to be facetious. I'm just, curious. And he didn't answer me. He looked down at the tabletop. I asked him again. The guy sitting next to him, his buddy, elbowed him and said, "Tell him, tell him, tell him." And I said, "Tell me, man." And he says, "I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan." I burst out laughing at the guy because I know a lot about the Klan. And they don't just come up and put their arm around some black guy and want to buy him a drink and hang out. It doesn't work that way. So, this guy's joking. So it's funny. So I'm laughing. And until he goes in his wallet and hands me his Klan membership card, I stop laughing. I recognize the Klan emblem, which is a red circle with a white cross and a red blood drop in the center of the cross. This thing was for real. I stopped laughing. I gave it back to him. And now I'm questioning myself. Why am I sitting here with a Klansman? What is going on here? But this guy was very, very friendly and very curious about me. And, we talked about the Klan and we talked about different things, but he gave me his phone number and wanted me to call him whenever I was to return to this club with this band, because he wanted to bring his friends, meaning Klansmen and Klanswomen, to, as he put it to me, to see the black guy who plays like Jerry Lee. I'm not so sure he called me the black guy to his friends, but that's how he explained it to me, right? So I would call him every 6 weeks, whenever the band was scheduled to play there again. And he'd come out. He'd bring Klansmen and Klanswomen. Now, they don't come in their robes and hoods. They come in, regular clothing. And they gather around the stage, and they watch me play with the band. And then they get out on the dance floor, and they dance, And on the break, I go over to his table, thank him for coming. Some of them were very curious about me. They wanted to meet me. They wanted to talk to me. There were 2 of them. Every time I make my way over to the table, they would get up and go to the other side of the room. So the tacit message was, we don't want to shake your hand. We don't want to touch you. We don't want to talk to you. We just want to look at you. Okay, whatever. So That was fine. And that went on till the end of that year, and I quit that band. And a few, so I lost contact with, with these people. It wasn't like, I'd go hang out with the Klan on my day off. I would do that now, but not back then, right? So, it dawned on me a few years later, Daryl, you blew it. The answer to your question that has been plaguing you since the age of 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? It fell right into your lap. Who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization with over 100-year history of practicing hating people who don't look like them, who don't believe as they believe? Get back in contact with that Klansman and get him to hook you up with the Klan leader from Maryland, interview him, and then travel up north, go down south, go to the Midwest, go to the West, and interview other Klan members and leaders, and write a book about it. I have every book written on the Ku Klux Klan. They're all written by white authors. There were 2 books written by black authors who detailed escaping a Klan lynching back in the 1930s, and the other one in the 1940s, but not from the perspective of sitting down face to face with their prospective lynchers and interviewing them. That's what I wanted to do. So I decided I would become the first black author to write a book on the Klan based on in-person, face-to-face interviews. So that's how that started. I got back in contact with that guy, and he was very reluctant to put me in touch with the Klan leader. He goes, I can't do that, Daryl. We both will get in trouble. I mean, he was genuinely concerned for my safety and his. But I persuaded him to give me the Klan leader's address and phone number, which he did eventually, under the condition that I not tell the Klan leader where I got his personal information.
Were you scared that, when you the first time he put his arm around you and he said, I'm in the Klan, I can't even pretend to be in your shoes, but I think I would have, been running out of there. I don't think I ever would have gone back, let alone told him, hey, I'm going to come here at this day and this time.
Well,
come meet me.
No, I was not scared. I've never really been scared of things like that, probably because I grew up around so many different people. It didn't really scare me. But I will tell you this. He was the first Klansman that I met who was friendly, let's say, okay? I had another encounter before him where there was an all-night restaurant right across from the Silver Dollar Lounge. I'd not been in the Silver Dollar Lounge, but I knew where the restaurant was. And I stopped in there one night to get something to eat, like, about 3 o'clock in the morning or something. And when I was pulling into the parking lot, I saw 4 guys standing around looking at something on the sidewalk. I looked to see what they were seeing because I'm pulling into the parking lot. There was a woman lying on the sidewalk out in front of this restaurant, or on the side of the restaurant rather, and there was a man straddled across her chest, and he was banging her head into the sidewalk and smacking her in the face. And these 4 guys, these are all white, were just standing there watching. And I parked my car, I don't know, maybe 30 feet away or something, in a space, and I'm going to go over there and pull this guy off. And when I got out of the car, he was totally oblivious when I'm parking my car. He just bang, 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 bang. And when I got out of the car and slammed my door, he all of a sudden jumped up and looked around, and he saw me, and he says, he cursed me and called me, a racial epithet and all this kind of stuff. And he got up and he tried to attack me, and I beat the daylights out of him. Then one of those 4 guys went inside the restaurant and called the police. Nobody called the police when this guy was beating up this woman. But then they called the police when this black guy beats him up. Okay? So these 2 Frederick County police officers show up. And, I want the guy arrested. Now, I didn't get hurt. He got hurt. But they would not arrest him. Something was very weird there. I couldn't put my finger on it. And they would not arrest him. I demanded his information, so they had to give it to me. They told him to leave the property immediately, and if he were to set foot back on this property within 24 hours, they would arrest him for trespassing and disturbing the peace. So he left. I brought the lady inside the restaurant. I went and got some ice from the kitchen, put it on her head, all that kind of stuff. And she and I talked. I said, "Listen, I don't know what happened, but if you want to if you know who this guy is, you want to take him to court, I will go to court as your witness." And she said, "Okay." She goes, "I'll testify on your behalf as well." I said, "Fine." So we exchanged information, right? So now I was going there to eat, but I want this guy arrested. So I said, I'm going to go get, swear a warrant for his arrest. So I went down to the police station, and the commissioner is there. And I said, I want somebody arrested. Some cops came, but they would not arrest him because they said they didn't see what happened, even though I told them what happened, right? So the guy gives me the complaint form. I'm filling it out. And I said, how long will it take for this guy to be served? Because I had his address and all that because the cops had to give it to me. He said, it'll probably take you about 3 days. You sign it, I sign it. I send it down to the sheriff's deputies, and they go out and serve him. I said, okay. And then right about then, in walks the guy that I beat up. He's in handcuffs behind his back. On this side is a state trooper. On this side is another state trooper. These are not Frederick County cops. These are Maryland State Police. The county cops, they play around. State police don't play. They do not play. All right? Each one had one of his arms, and he's handcuffed behind his back. And I saw him through the big picture window in the commissioner's office. I said, there he is right there. That's him right there. Commissioner said, sign it. I'll serve him right now. So I signed it. Commissioner went out there and served the guy, right? So long story short, what happened was the guy left. But when the cops left, he came back looking for me. I wasn't there. I was down here. And he started a fight with some other black guy in the restaurant. And this time when the police were called, I guess the troopers were in the area and they responded because it's right off the highway, right off I-70. And so they came and they arrested the guy. All right. So unlike the county cops. So now, fast forward, the day of the hearing in court, the court hearing comes, right? I go down to this lady's house that was beat up. I pick her up, and we're driving up to Frederick. And she's telling me that she was his ex-fiancée. And she had left him because he was seeing somebody else at the same time and had gotten this other girl pregnant or whatever, right? So she wanted nothing to do with him. He did not want to let her go. And it was like, if I can't have you, nobody will have you. Boom, boom, boom. He wanted his cake, eat it too. But she also told me that he was a county firefighter. He was a fireman for Frederick County. That explained why the Frederick County police, they all know each other, right? And she tells me that he was a lieutenant in the county fire department. And then she tells me he's also a member of the Ku Klux Klan. That didn't bother me. I mean, I could care less if he's a Klansman or a police officer or a firefighter. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to, jump in and defend this person who's getting the crap beaten out of her. So, we go to court. Of course, I win the case. But that was my first encounter with someone that I knew for sure was in the Klan. But I didn't know he was in the Klan, but it didn't matter to me.
Of all the Klansmen you've spoken with, was there one story, one moment of breakthrough that still stays with you today?
Oh, my goodness, Tim. I have so many of those stories, so many, and they all are very important to me. Even the minor ones to the major ones, they are prominent in my mind. But I can I can share a couple with you to give you an example. I never set out, and this is where the media gets me wrong. All right, when you see my name in the media, it'll say black musician Daryl Davis converts 200 plus KKK members or white supremacists. No, I did not convert anybody, not even one. I am the impetus for over 200 white supremacists, whether they're Klan, neo-Nazi, or just the racist next door, to convert themselves. All right. I never set out to get people out of the Klan. All I set out for initially was to meet these people, interview you, ask you, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And after I get their answer, I put it in a book and we're done. And I never see you again. You never see me again. That was my initial intention. But then something happened. The more I would talk with these people, I began seeing them change. And I'm curious, like what's going on here? And then the first one quit as a result of our conversations. I thought, well, that's a fluke. The guy was never dedicated to racist beliefs anyway. And then another one quit. And, I said, wait a minute, I'm on to something. What am I doing that other people have not done? What is going on in these conversations that is causing people to rethink? And so now, I even today, I've been doing this now for 45 years. Even today, I don't try to say, no, you're wrong. You need to give me your robe and your hood, and you need to get out of this organization. Do I feel that way? Yes. Do I do that? No. I have respectable civil conversations with people. And what I've noticed is this. I have been to 64 countries. When you combine my childhood travels with my mom and dad, and now my adult travels as a professional musician performing or lecturing around the world. I have performed in all 50 states, be it lecturing or playing music. All right. What I have noticed is this: no matter how far or how close I go from our own country, whether it's right next door to Canada or right next door to Mexico, or whether it's halfway around the globe to Asia or Australia, Africa. I lived in Africa for 10 years. I lived in Europe, during my parents' jobs. What I've noticed is no matter how similar or how different the people I encounter around the world may be from me, maybe they don't look like I look. Maybe they don't speak my same language. Maybe they don't worship as I do. Perhaps they don't worship at all. I always conclude one thing: that everybody I have met anywhere on this planet, I haven't met any aliens yet, but anywhere on this planet is a human being. And every human being wants these 5 core values in their lives. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to be respected. We all want to be heard. We all want to be treated fairly and truthfully. And we all want the same things for our family as anybody else would want for their family. And if we can learn to apply those 5 core values, or any of those values, when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation or in a culture or society in which we are unfamiliar or uncomfortable, I can guarantee you that your navigation of that situation, that culture, that society will be much more smooth and much more positive and much more productive. So that's what I was doing with these Klan people. My father's job when he's in the American embassy in different countries abroad, his job is to foster better relationships with foreign governments and our U.S. government. That's why you have ambassadors and cultural attachés and all these embassy people. That's their job. Okay? Now, I grew up in that world of diplomacy. I didn't know I was absorbing this at the time. To me, it was just, what kids do. I didn't realize, that it was not what every kid does. But I was always around that kind of thing, of people having different conversations, agreeing, disagreeing, and talking civilly, even in disagreement. So I was just executing those things that I grew up with, not even realizing it. It was just second nature. But when I looked back and I saw all these Klan people quitting and renouncing and becoming my friends, it's like, What am I doing that nobody else is doing? And that's what it boils down to, those 5 core values. So they convert themselves. I give them reason to rethink their ideology.
That first call with the Klan leader of the area or the state.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, first of all, you have way more courage than you're giving yourself credit for. Because I don't think. I mean, that takes some serious guts to call the person.
But Troy,
I don't.
Trust me, I hear you. I appreciate your words. But for me, truly, it's not courage. It was curiosity. It's like, how can these people be like that? But now, to your point, okay, that's why it's so important to understand how I grew up. Let's say I didn't have that experience being around people from all over the world. Let's say I grew up here in my own country my whole life. All right. So I was always in segregated schools. And the first time I went to an integrated school, kids tried to beat me up or call me names or whatever, and every day I was getting rocks and bottles thrown at me. Would I be doing this work today? Maybe not. Maybe I said, whoa, this is the way life is. They need to stay away from me. I need to stay away from them. So you stay on your side of the tracks, I'll stay on my side of the tracks, and the twain may never meet. That might have been my attitude. But because I saw people, I became friends with people who looked just like the people who perpetrated violence upon me. I knew it had nothing to do with the color of the skin. It had to do more with attitude. Yeah. So for me, it wasn't so much courage as it was curiosity. What makes my fellow American, who is less white than some European, because most white people in our country are mixed with something. All right, just like most black people are mixed with something in this country. Like, you look at me, I'm not as dark as somebody from Nigeria. I've been to Nigeria. I lived in Africa 10 years, okay? Yes, we all come from Africa, but you can see there's something mixed in with me, all right? So in any event, I'm curious as to find out, why do my fellow white countrymen treat me this way, but yet people who are more white, like people from Sweden and Denmark, embrace me? This makes no sense. So it's more curiosity than courage for me.
So I'm going to say it's both, but even if we just say it's just curiosity, you call somebody that hates you for no good reason, but they hate you. They've got a violent history, the Klan, and you just say, like, say, hey, come meet me here, I'll be here, and not have like police with you or friends watching or something. It's like, so you call tell us about that phone call. You call the head of Maryland. How does that go?
Okay. So, I want to answer Tim's question. So I'm going to give you a few examples
sure.
of some of these memorable experiences. So this will be one right here. I got the guy, the head of the Klan from Maryland, who would later become the national head of the Klan, right? And then he got out and became, my friend, and I have his Robin Hood and all that. But when I got this guy to give me his address and phone number, he said, Daryl, do not fool with him. He will kill you. This guy was genuinely concerned about my safety. And my response to him was, that's why I need to see him. Why would he want to kill me? Just because of the color of my skin. This is what I'm trying to understand, I mean, I don't want to understand it at the point of death, but I do want to understand it, right? So, but that was my mentality. I look at it like this. I would rather see a Klansman walking up the sidewalk towards me than, let's say, a police officer or somebody in a suit and tie. I know what that police officer is supposed to stand for, but I also know the history of blacks in the police. But when you see a Klansman, you know what that person stands for. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. So you have more information about that person in the robe and hood than you do about that person in the uniform or suit and tie. That person might smile in your face and stab you in the back. I mean, I'm not trying to be paranoid. I'm just stating a fact. When that person puts on that robe and hood, there's no question what that person stands for. But when that person puts on a uniform with a badge and a gun, you know what he's supposed to stand for. And some of them do stand for that. Others go the opposite way. Okay, so given the fact that this guy had told me that don't fool with him, he'll kill you, I wanted to ensure that I got to meet this guy. I can't let this guy escape me. I need to question him. Why why would you want to kill me? I had my secretary. My secretary was white, all right? And I say was because not that she changed color, but she passed away. So her name was Mary. I had Mary call the guy, and I told her specifically, do not tell him that I'm black. Just say you're working for somebody who's writing a book on the Klan. Would he consent to giving your boss an interview? All right? I could have called him myself. I'm the one with the phone number. But I figured if I called him, he might detect in my voice, this is a black person on the other end of this phone line. Click, and my whole project would have ended before it ever got started. But I knew if Mary had called him, he would know by her voice this is a white woman. And he would not automatically assume that this white woman is working for a black man, especially a black man who's writing a book on the Klan, because they didn't exist. So that might up the chances of him agreeing. And then when he shows up, obviously he can see that I'm black. And he can make up his mind right then and there what he wants to do. Does he want to sit down and do the interview? Does he want to walk away? Does he want to try to kill me? I don't know. All right, but I'm willing to take that chance. So that's how that worked. Mary called him. He agreed to do the interview. He didn't ask what color I was. And so Mary and I were already in the room for several hours before he even showed up. I had given Mary some money to go down the hall and purchase a soda pop out of the vending machine and put it in the ice bucket, fill it with ice, and have everything prepared. I had no idea what this man was going to do when he saw me. I knew he'd be shocked, but I had no idea what he was going to do. The only thing I knew for sure was what I was going to do. And what I was going to do was offer him a cold beverage, the same as I would offer you or your dad or anybody else who comes to visit me, right? So got the soda pop, put it on the dresser, and we wait. Right on time, knock, knock, knock on the door. Mary goes and opens the door. In walks the bodyguard for this guy. He's wearing the Klan patch on his chest. He's in military camouflage. The letters KKK on this side. Embroidered on his cap, it said Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And on his hip, he had a semi-automatic handgun in a holster, like a Glock. And he comes strolling in. Now, the room, you can't see who's in the room from the hallway. You have to come in the room, go around the corner, and then you see who's in the room. So I'm sitting at this table. And he turns the corner and sees me and just freezes in his tracks. Now, the Klan leader is on the other side of the corner. He doesn't realize that his bodyguard has stopped short. So he comes around the corner and slams into the guy's back and knocks the guy forward. And now they both are stumbling around, like looking all over the room, looking at me, looking back. And I'm just sitting there, looking at them. And I can read their faces. They're thinking, did we misunderstand the room number, or is this an ambush? 'Cause I saw the apprehension. And so I stood up and I went like this. I showed my palms so they could see I was carrying nothing in my hands. And I walked toward the Klan leader, and his name was Roger Kelly. I said, "Hi, Mr. Kelly." I said, "I'm Daryl Davis." I put my hand out. He shook my hand. And the bodyguard shook my hand. So far, so good. I said, please, come in, have a seat. And so he sat down just opposite me, and he asked me for some ID. I showed him some ID. And then the bodyguard stood to Mr. Kelly's right, very rigid, like bodyguards do. And anyway, we got on with this interview. I had a recorder on the table, and I had blank cassettes in my bag. I had a little black bag beside my chair. And I had a copy of the Bible in the bag because I'm all prepared. The Klan claims to be a Christian organization. Now, I've read the Bible. I have seen nothing in there that says blacks and whites must be separate. But the Klan claims that the Bible preaches racial separation. So I want to be able to reach down and pull out my Bible and say, here, Mr. Kelly, please show me chapter and verse where it says blacks and whites must be separate. So, because, they base everything, or so they think, on the Bible. So, that's why I brought the Bible. You'll prove it to me if I don't understand that. So every time the cassette ran out of tape, I'd reach down and get a fresh cassette. Or if he said, Mr. Davis, the Bible says, I'd reach down, pull out the Bible. Here, Mr. Kelly, show me chapter and verse. Every time I reached down like this, the bodyguard would reach up like this. Now, he never pulled his gun out, but he'd rest his hand on the butt of the gun, right?
Yeah.
I totally got that. That's his job. He's the bodyguard. I'm the enemy. I'm the black guy. This is the head of the Klan, right? And so he doesn't know what's in my black bag here. So he's doing his job to protect his boss. I got it. But after, 45 minutes or so, every time I reached down, he'd reach up. After about 45 minutes, he stopped, reaching for his gun. When I went inside the bag, he realized there was no threat in there. He relaxed. A little over an hour into this interview, Mr. Kelly and I are just talking casually, and there was a very sudden, very short and fast noise, like a tsh, and we all jumped. And I jumped out of my chair, and I hit the table. I'm getting ready to dive across that table and take down the bodyguard and the Klan leader. I had gone into survival mode. I was fearing for my life. I could hear the former Klansmen, who I met in the bar, saying, Daryl, don't fool with Roger Kelly, he will kill you. So now I'm thinking, what had I done? What had I said to cause this man to go off and make some weird noise that I can't explain? And so I'm getting ready to come across that table. But I'm looking right into Mr. Kelly's eyes. I didn't say one word, but my eyes were speaking. They were shouting at him, and they were saying, what did you just do? Well, Mr. Kelly's eyes had fixated on mine, and I could read his eyes. His eyes were saying to me, what did you just do? And the bodyguard had his hand back on his gun, looking at both of us like, what did either one of y'all just do? Mary was sitting on the dresser next to me, to my left. And she realized what had happened. And she began explaining it to us when it happened again. And we all started laughing. The ice bucket with the ice and cans of soda in there, the ice had begun melting, and the cans of soda were falling down the ice. That was it, right? This was a teaching moment. Okay, I won't say it was a learning moment. Learning would come later. But it was a teaching moment. And the lesson taught is this: all because some foreign entity being the bucket of ice, cans of soda, we knew it was over there, but we'd long forgotten about it because we were so engrossed in conversation. So it was foreign to us, right? All because some foreign entity entered into our little comfort zone via the noise that it made, with no explanation, we became fearful of each other. We were ignorant as to what was happening over there with the ice bucket. Ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things of which we are ignorant, right? Of which we don't understand, right? If you don't keep that ignorance in check or address it, that ignorance will escalate to the next level, which is fear. We fear those things of which we are ignorant. If you don't keep that fear in check, it will escalate to the next level, which is hatred. We hate the things that frighten us. If you don't keep that hatred in check, it will escalate to the ultimate level, which is destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless at the end of the day, and we were simply ignorant. All right? So ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. This applies to whether you're dealing with little kids or adults. Doesn't matter. Let me give you an example, a true example with little kids. I do this from time to time when I talk to little groups of elementary school kids or whatever. They'll be sitting at their little desks, from the front all the way back 6 or 7 rows back. I'm standing at the front of the class, and I'm just talking casually, and then all of a sudden I'll say, hey, there's a snake under your chair. And I'll point to some little girl or some little guy in the front row, point down between their legs and say, there's a snake under your desk or under your chair. Everybody in that classroom, every kid from the front row all the way to the back of the room throws their legs up in the air and screams in fear at my suggestion there's a snake there, right? And then they realize there's no snake there and everybody starts laughing. And I say to them, why were you all screaming and yelling? Well, the answers you get are, I'm afraid of snakes. I hate snakes. Afraid, hate. Fear and hate. Okay? And I said, well, why are you afraid of snakes? Why do you hate snakes? Well, they're poisonous. They're slimy. There's your ignorance. I don't know if you've ever touched a snake before or not. Snakes are not slimy. They're dry. All right? And not all snakes are poisonous. Some are very good snakes. Okay? So there's your ignorance. So the ignorance breeds that fear, which breeds that hatred. I'm afraid of snakes. I hate snakes. So then I asked them, well, obviously there was no snake under your chair. I was just making a joke. But let's say there really was a snake under your desk. What would you want me to do about it? You know what they say? Kill it. There's your destruction. These are little kids, single-digit kids, not even 10 years old. Kill it. Ignorance breeds fear. Fear breeds hatred. Hatred breeds destruction. Now, here's where we go wrong in our country. First of all, we spend way too much time talking about the other person, talking at the other person, and talking past the other person. Why don't we spend a little bit of time talking with the other person? Okay? That's what I do. Now, where we go wrong is this. We spend way too much time addressing the destruction. Forget the destruction. All right? What's been destroyed is not coming back. The destruction is merely a byproduct, a symptom of the root cause. I say forget the hatred. That's another symptom. Forget the fear. That's another symptom of the root cause. If you fix the root cause is ignorance. If you fix ignorance, then there's nothing to fear, because we fear that of which we're ignorant. You fix the ignorance, there's nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to get mad about and destroy. The good thing is this: we can cure ignorance. The cure for ignorance is education and exposure. Unfortunately, we cannot cure stupidity, all right? So, there are people who are ignorant and there are people who are stupid. So let's work with the ignorant people, because we can fix that, all right? And that's where we need to spend our money, our time, our efforts, our resources, our energy in fixing the nucleus, okay? If somebody tells you, you got bone cancer, you can't put a Band-Aid on top. You got to go down to the bone and shoot the chemo or radiation at the nucleus, at the source, the root cause. A Band-Aid, you're just covering up the symptom of the rash on the back of your hand or whatever, where the bone is, okay? So we cannot put a Band-Aid on racism or anti-Semitism, all right? We need to cure it. And so you have to go down to the root cause. Now, to answer Tim's questions about some of the memorable, that was one of the memorable things, okay? The bucket of ice thing. But another one, I had this Klansman in my car. He was an exalted cyclops, which means district leader. And we were riding around, I'm driving, he's over here in the passenger seat. And somehow the topic of black crime came about. And I've never understood that. You've heard the term black on black crime. What does that mean? There's no such thing. Okay, are black people criminals? Yeah, some are. Okay, do they commit crimes? Absolutely. Okay, but how come you don't hear about white on white crime? White people commit crimes too, but you only hear about black on black crime. If a white guy goes out and does something stupid or commits a crime against another white person, they don't call it white on white crime. All right, just call it a criminal act. All right, black on black crime does not exist any more so than white on white crime exists. That is a crime of proximity. People will tend to commit crimes around people who are around them, in their neighborhood, in their little, wherever they are. All right, it's a crime of opportunity based on proximity. For example, if I'm a druggie and I need my fix, and I need some money to go buy my drugs or whatever, and I live in a black neighborhood, I'm not going to drive all the way across town to some white neighborhood, and take out somebody over there and take their money. I'm going to get the first person around here who I think has money. All right? Same thing with white people. They're not going to drive all the way over there to some black neighborhood or whatever, if they live in separate neighborhoods. All right? It's a crime of opportunity. It's a crime of proximity. All right. So anyway, this guy was talking about black on black crime, this Klansman, this assaulted Cyclops. And he said, and I've heard this a million times since, all black people have a gene within us. We're born with this gene that makes us violent. And so I'm driving, I'm looking at him. I said, well, how do you figure this? And he says, well, who's doing all the drive-bys and carjackings in Southeast? He was referring to Southeast Washington, D.C., which is predominantly black. There's some white people who live there, but it's predominantly black, and it's very high crime ridden. I said, okay, black people are doing that, but that's what lives there. I said, you are not considering the demographics of that area. I said, who's doing all the crime up in Bangor, Maine? White people, because that's what lives in Bangor, all right? So he said, no, the demographics have nothing to do with it. Black people are born with this gene. And I said, look, I'm as black as anybody you've ever seen. I said, I have never done a carjacking or a drive-by. How do you explain that? This guy did not hesitate to even think about it. He answered me like that. He said, your gene is latent. It hasn't come out yet. It almost came out. but I was speechless. I mean, how do you even bite into that and try to process it? It's so far out. So I'm driving like a deer with it, in the headlights, speechless. He's over here all smug, like, you got nothing to say. So I realized I had to go to where he was mentally to get through. So I thought about it for a moment, and I said, well, all white people are born with a gene that makes them a serial killer. And he says, what are you talking about? I said, name me 3 black serial killers. He couldn't name me any. I said, here, I'm going to give you one. I named one for him. I said, just name me 2. He couldn't do it. I said, Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, Henry Lee Lucas, John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, David Berkowitz, son of Sam, Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler. I said, those are all serial killers, man. You're a serial killer. He says, I said, they're all white. And he says, Daryl, I've never killed anybody. I said, your gene is latent, hasn't come out yet. He goes, well, that's stupid. I said, well, duh. I said, you're right. It is stupid. But it's no more stupid for me to say that about you than what you said about me. And he got very, very quiet. But I could tell his wheels were spinning in his head. All right? And then he changed the subject. But within 4 or 5 months of that conversation, that guy quit the Klan and gave me his robe and hood based on that conversation. So that was, and by the way, that was the very first robe I ever got. And so that was one of those memorable moments. But I've had many, many other ones.
It's hard to comprehend what some people believe. Daryl, when you first meet someone in a hate group, what's your instinct? Are you sizing them up, or are you immediately trying to connect?
Well, that's a good question. I think I'm always sizing them up, but also, figuring out where can we make a connection? Because what you want to do is you want to find some common ground. And once you find the common ground, then it gets easier in the conversation, and the gap between you begins to narrow, as you find more and more in common. So I'm sizing them up in terms of my own safety. What would I do if this person does something crazy? Would I be able to handle this or whatever? I have safety in the back of my head, but I'm also looking for ways to connect. And what you do is you find topics that are consequential to both parties. Like, for example, if I were to ask you, do you believe we need a better education for kids? You would say yes. If I were to ask you, do you feel that we need to get drugs off the street? You would say yes. All right. So they believe that too. So there's a point of commonality. You might like James Bond, and the Klan leader might like James Bond. So you have that in common. Now, maybe he likes Sean Connery and you like Roger Moore, but at least you both like James Bond. Both those guys played James Bond. Or he likes Daniel Craig or whoever, multiple James Bonds have been. At least you like James Bond. So that narrows that gap. And if you spend 5 minutes with your worst enemy, you will find something in common and that gap will narrow. You spend another 5 minutes, you'll find more in common. When you get here, you are in a cordial relationship with your adversary. You might not be going to his, birthday party or something, but you're in a cordial relationship. And you keep on talking. Now you're here. You're being friendly with this person. You're not agreeing on everything, but you're being friendly. He's being friendly with you. This is causing a cognitive dissonance in that person's mind. And because they have found so much in common with you, they began questioning themselves. How can this be? This is not right. This black person likes the same things I do. This Jewish person or this gay person or this Muslim person, likes the same things that I do. It's causing a cognitive dissonance. And then they end up finding so many more things in common with you than they have in contrast, that the trivial things they found in contrast, such as skin color, or whether you go to a church, a synagogue, a mosque, or a temple, begin to matter less and less. And that's where you want to go, with these conversations. You start off with things that affect everybody. Taxes, high gas prices, education, drugs, whatever. And then you begin, narrowing into their beliefs. And then another thing that I learned, that I've always done, but I do it more now with this, is be more inclusive, because they are exclusive, right? You have to be white, you have to be Christian, you have to be this, you have to be that, straight, heterosexual, whatever, to be in this group. All right. So, don't use you and I. Well, I think this, or you need to look at it like this. Don't use those terms, you and I, or me. All right. Say we and say us. So if I want you to look at something or think about something, I don't say, well, I want you to think about it like this. I'll say, let's think about it like this for a moment. In other words, let us think about it. So I'm always including you with me. What about if we pause for a second and look at this perspective? We. Not, how about if you pause for a moment and you look at this perspective? How about we pause for a moment and we look at this perspective? Always be inclusive. And believe it or not, that works wonders on the human psyche. They don't even realize it, but they are subliminally being drawn into you.
What's it like when someone you've been talking to finally says, I'm done with the Klan? Is it relief, joy, maybe sadness for the years they lost?
No, when they're done, they're done. Sometimes there is regret because of the things they've done to other people that have been bad. And I always say, you got to be accountable for the things that you did. You got to, either make restitution, give some kind of apology, public or to the person, the family or whatever. You may or may not be forgiven, but you need to accept responsibility and accountability for it. And they're willing to do that. They may be sad for all the years that they were perpetrating their stupidity and their ignorance, but now they're happy to be away from that. But now here's what happens, and this is and I'm glad you asked that, Tim. It's very important that when you get somebody out or somebody comes out of those groups, it's very important that you offer them support, okay? Because when they join that group, they take a blood oath. That becomes their family, above and beyond all family, unless their mother and father or whatever are in there already, okay? That becomes their family. And if you get old, or you get sick, or you can no longer, attend the rallies or do things, then you can retire quietly. All right, and that's fine. But if you leave and you start speaking out against them, renouncing the ideology, they can and will retaliate. And that can bring a lot of physical harm, even death. All right. So people who get out, if they're married or they have small kids or whatever, they tend to fly under the radar. All right, I know a lot of them who fly under the radar because they don't want harm to come to their family. Others who are single or their kids are grown and moved away or whatever, so some of them don't mind speaking out and renouncing it publicly. But the point is this: once they come out, they can't go back because you have betrayed your family. By not believing in it anymore, you've betrayed them. So they're not going to let you come back in. And so now you're out swinging in the wind with nobody, no support. Your friends that you used to have, who were normal before you got radicalized, they don't want anything to do with you, because you carry a lot of baggage with you as a white supremacist, as a racist. There's a lot of baggage, all right? And so even though you may have quit and be done with it, there's still that stigma, all right? Sort of like, you're looking for a bookkeeper for your business. So you put an ad in the paper, for people to apply for the bookkeeping position, right? And, you read all these qualifications on the people's resumes, and you see this one person's resume, he's definitely very qualified, or she's definitely very qualified, has all kinds of accolades, etc., but this person is a felon. They served, 10 years for embezzlement on Wall Street or something, whatever. You might be a little reluctant to hire that person because of that stigma, even though they've paid their debt to society and they've done very well and so forth and so on. That stigma still is baggage. So when people come out of these groups, the label racist or former white supremacist, these tags carry a lot of negative baggage, and people tend to shun you, even though they may have been your friend a long time ago before you even got involved. It'd be like this. Let's say Troy and I are good friends, and this weekend I go out to a party and I drink and I get drunk, and I'm driving home and I'm weaving, and cop pulls me over and I blow the whatever it is, the breathalyzer thing. And I'm way over the limit. And so he locks me up and arrests me and charges me with driving while intoxicated. So I called Troy, hey man, can you come down and bail me out of this jail? Troy's my friend. Troy will come down, he'll bail me out, and he'll give me a lecture, say, hey man, how come you didn't call me to come pick you up from the party? I would have come and got you, I'm your buddy, you don't have to drive drunk. And then he'll chastise me for being drunk and getting behind the wheel of a car. But he will still be my friend. But if I call Troy and say, hey, man, I need you to come bail me out of a jail. I just killed somebody, or I raped somebody, or I molested somebody's kid. Troy's going to be like, whoa. He may consider distancing himself from me at that point, even though he didn't know me to be like that or whatever. And we were great friends. We went to school together. We went to each other's weddings together, whatever. That label, carries a certain stigma. So does the label white supremacist or even ex-white supremacist, former white supremacist. It carries a negative label. And so when these people leave, they have no family. If their biological family was not in it already, the kid just took a left turn, the family has already disowned the kid because, they may have black friends or Jewish friends or gay friends. They don't want their kid in the house when their friends come over and visit, insulting their friends. So they've disowned that kid. And so the kid has nowhere, the Klansman or supremacist, neo-Nazi, has nowhere to go. So it's very important for me to be there as a pillar of strength, as an anchor for them, to give them that support until they can stand on their own 2 feet, and build a new life. Because all they knew for however long they were in the ideology, in the cult, they were surrounded with people of the same mentality.
Your kindness is truly impressive. I've read that you faced some strong criticism where people say you're too soft on racists or that you're wasting your time. How do you carry that weight or respond to those criticisms?
Okay. I am not too soft on racists. I mean, I've heard that before, and I've been in many confrontations, verbal, being accused of being a sellout, being an Uncle Tom, being an Oreo, being too soft on racists, and all this kind of stuff. I have Klan robes and hoods and swastika flags and all kinds of stuff that have been given to me by people who once committed a lot of crimes or held those ideas. What I do is I ask the people accusing me, how many robes and hoods have you collected? What have you done to improve race relations other than just march up and down the street yelling through a bullhorn? I've taken actionable action with the very people that you are opposed to. And some of these people now stand on stage with me and renounce their organizations and help de-radicalize people who are still involved and help prevent young people from going down that path. What have you done to improve race relations other than, chastise me for sitting down with somebody who hates me?
Is there anything you wish people understood better about your work that they often miss when they just hear a headline?
Yeah. Unfortunately, people in this country, I'm specifically talking about my fellow Americans, most Americans do not travel. All right? According to the U.S. Census Bureau, less than 50% of Americans even own a passport. All right? And when we travel within our own country, we don't go very far from where we live. Maybe 2 or 3 hours to the city or to the beach or something like that. But we don't go abroad a whole lot. We don't even have passports, most of us. All right? But our country is very rich in diversity. And we don't take advantage of all the different people and cultures and things that we have right here at our fingertips. I still travel abroad, obviously, but for me to absorb all these cultures and religions and people and ideologies, I had to cross the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean numerous times, cross the equator and all kinds of stuff, right? Today, we have the internet. Where are you based, in California?
We're in New York.
New York, okay. Yeah. So you're 4 hours away from where I am, if you're in the city. We have the internet. I don't have to drive up 95 to New York in order to talk to you. Even if you lived in Los Angeles or you lived in London or Rome, we could still be having this very same conversation. In our country, you don't have to go to Italy to sit down and have a conversation with an Italian. We have plenty of Italians here, or an Ethiopian, or a Japanese person, or whatever. We have it here, but yet we don't take advantage of it. Well, there are no Japanese in my neighborhood, or no Italians in my neighborhood. Well, you know what? You've got the internet. Go to their neighborhood virtually and talk with them. All right? We don't take advantage of these things. And so I think by doing that, people all they see is what they grew up with. And so there's been a lot of racial animus, and there still is a lot of racial animus in this country. But I have seen difference. I have been treated by the same color people who oppose me in my own country in other countries, treated better. So I know that things can change. I know it's not the color of the skin, It's the culture inside their mind that has to change. And education can provide that. Listen, like I said, if I had grown up here my whole life, then yes, there may be a good chance I wouldn't be doing this work. All right. But I know that people can get along. I've seen it all over the world. I've been to 64 countries. Now, some countries have their own issues. Like, for example, in Ireland, it's the Catholics and the Protestants that are like this, right? Over here in this country, it doesn't matter if you're Catholic and I'm Protestant. We don't even think about that. In Ireland, it's a very, very big deal. They will kill one another and bomb each other's train stations and this, that, and the other. All right. I've been to Lebanon. In Lebanon, it's the Christians and the Muslims. Okay. It's not black and white. It's religious. In Israel, it's the Palestinians and the Jews. It's not black and white because they look alike over there. The Muslims, the Jewish people and the Palestinians, especially if they're Israeli, right? They still have that Sephardic type look, right? So it's not a color thing, it's a religious thing. In South Africa, a while back, during apartheid and things like that, it was the Hutus and the Tutsis that were fighting each other. Here in our country, we've even had Indian wars, Native American wars between different tribes. So they may look alike, but there are differences. All this travel that let me say this. My very favorite quote of all time is by Mark Twain, the author. His real name was Samuel Clemens. But anyway, we all know Mark Twain from Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer and all that. But he had a lot of great quotes. And my favorite quote of all time is called the Travel Quote by Mark Twain. And I'll quote it for you. Mark Twain said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." And that is so true. We have to get out and see the world, even see our own country. Some people never even leave their block where they live, because going off their block, they're going into another country in their mind, But we need to go explore our own countries. We have so much to offer here. Let's take advantage of it. Now, all this travel, that I've done, like I said, I've been to 64 countries around the world on 6 continents. I've been to all 50 states. What does all that travel mean, other than I have a lot of hotel points and frequent flyer miles? What it means is that I have, it does not make me a better human being than someone who has less travel, but it gives me a better and broader perspective on humanity than if I just stayed in one little corner of the earth all my lifetime. So I have a lot to offer in terms of perspective and opening up somebody's mind and telling them, because all they can do is presume what somebody is like. I know what somebody's like because I've met that person. I've been there. I've experienced that culture. If you haven't, then all you can do is just speculate, right? So that's what I have to offer. And I try to offer it vicariously to a lot of people who don't leave their block, either physically or mentally. And so I don't consider that being soft on people. When you have been mistreated for 400 years, as I have, as the descendant of slaves, I've been mistreated, right? Not just in my present form, but all through my ancestry. And you're still being mistreated 400 years later. It's time you do something different. What's the old saying? Was it Isaac Newton or somebody said, if you do the exact same thing the exact same way, you're going to get the exact same result. So why 400 years later is racism still here? Obviously, we're not doing something right. Now, I'm not saying that what I do is the only way to get it done. No, racism is a multifaceted problem. All right, I am offering one way. And the way that I offer is effective. There are other effective ways. And rather than compete with one another, why don't we consolidate and cooperate with one another. All right. For example, the way I look at it is like a SWAT team or the police department. Let's say your next door neighbor is having a fight with his wife, and you hear pots and pans flying, up against the wall and yelling and screaming and all that kind of stuff, and it's turning violent. So you call the police. 2 cops are going to show up. They're going to knock on the door. They're going to go in. They're going to separate the husband and wife. One cop might take the husband to the bedroom. Other cop take the wife to the kitchen, and each one's going to get the story. And then they come back and say, okay, now you all need to calm down. And if we get called again, we're going to come and lock you both up. And so they leave. That's usually how that ends up. But now let's say we've heard too many times about some husband who has maybe lost his job or fell off the rocker at work or whatever, and he, maybe he got fired or something happened, and he comes home and he takes his wife and kids hostage. We've heard this numerous times, and sometimes he kills them all, and then he turns the gun on himself. Right? We've heard those stories. So let's say you were aware that your neighbor, now he came home with a gun and he's holding the wife hostage, threatening to kill her and kill the kids. So now you call the cops. So now you got half the police there, the 2 guys who came there initially, right? But they're not anywhere near the house. They're standing back with a bullhorn, yelling at the house. And then you got the SWAT team, and they're all around the house, peeping in the windows at the front, the back. They might even land on the roof with a helicopter or whatever. And then you got this guy who's calling the husband on the phone. He's known as a hostage negotiator, right? All these people are coordinating with each other. The goal is to free the wife and the kids. Okay? We don't want anybody getting shot and killed. So that's the goal. If one of the SWAT team snipers has a bullseye on the guy's forehead and he can shoot that guy and take him out without hurting the kids or the wife, he says, I got him in sight. There's no other collateral damage. Then the commander says, go for it. Boom. The guy shoots him. The guy's dead. It's over. Done. He has the authority to go ahead and take the guy out. If the hostage negotiator says, hey, everybody stand down, the guy is talking to me, he's going to release one of the kids, then everybody stands down and the kid comes walking out the door, you leave it with the hostage negotiator because he's getting success. All right. If the 2 guys who came there initially and they're yelling on the bullhorn, hey, put your weapon out the front door or whatever, da. If he's cooperating, then you leave it with them. Whichever one is working the best, causing this guy to de-escalate the situation, that's who you go with. But you have all these options to address the same problem. All right. So there are many different ways to address racism. Racism is a multifaceted problem. And my way is only one way. And it works, as I've proven, it works very effectively when I'm doing it. And I've seen other people who've taken my methodology and had success solving problems they've had in their own families. All right. So that's one way. There are other ways that the people who are opposed to me, my detractors, they want to solve, some of them want to solve racism, and they have their own way. But why criticize me if it's working? I'm not criticizing you. Why don't we work together? You work at it from this angle, I'll work it from that angle. He or she might work it from another angle. Let's get together and talk about what is effective and what's working so we can work together and solve the problem together. Because not everybody is going to react. I mean, I've had Klansmen that I'm talking to for an interview, and then they want to fight. So then I have to deal with that. It happens. Listen, a Klansman is not stamped out of a standard cookie cutter. They come from all different walks of life. Some are more violent than the others. Some are less violent. Some want separation. They're called white separatists. And then some want supremacy. Everybody who's non-white needs to get out of the country, go back to where they came from, or we will take you out. Where the other ones want, black people should live over there in their neighborhood and should have their own restaurants and their own schools and their own swimming pool. We should be able to have ours. That's a separatist, where a supremacist wants you out of here, So there are different levels of hate, but they all need to be addressed.
When you look at someone who used to be filled with hate, who's now changed, what does that do for your faith in humanity?
It proves that we all are human, and humans have the ability to change. Because if we couldn't change, there would be no point in my even starting this work. We all are humans. We all are flawed to a certain degree, but we all have the capability to learn and to do better. And so I'm very excited, when somebody changes. I'm happy that the person saw the light and they saw it on their own, because then they will pass it on to their kids or their friends or whoever else. So that's very rewarding for me. It's nothing that I feel, is it a burden? Yes, it's a burden. I shouldn't have to do this. I should be able to live like anybody else and not be judged by the color of my skin. I didn't come into this world wanting to go and do this kind of work. Listen, I have more fun on stage playing my piano with my band and seeing my audience smile and dance and have a good time. That's what I want to do. I don't want to go to Klan rallies and watch these people march around a burning cross yelling white power, and whatever else they yell. To me, that's not fun. But it is a necessity today in this country that we address these things. So that's why I do it.
Staying on the topic of faith, do you have a personal faith that you've ever leaned on? It seems like that would be a huge tool for you to rely on while doing the work you're doing.
Yes. I was raised Christian. I was a deacon in my church at one time. I am a firm believer in God. There's no doubt in my mind. Ever since I was a child, I've known that God exists. And I know more so now than ever because I've been in some situations which I should not have been able to walk out of, with some of these crazy people. But so, yes, I know that he has intervened and saved me from different situations. I am a little disgruntled with Christianity right now, especially those who think Christianity is the only religion that is accepted by God. I don't buy into that. Christian supremacy is what I call it. And you have Jewish supremacy, you have Islamic supremacy. There's nothing wrong with all these other religions, but there are sects, sects, right? Sects of these religions that are radical. Like the Ku Klux Klan claims to be Christian. Well, they're not the Christian that I am, or that I grew up with. We have radical Islam, but that's not the Islam that I know. I've never been Islamic or Muslim, but I know plenty of people. I've lived in Muslim countries, okay? And they don't go around bombing places and doing this and doing that. You have radical people in all different religions. But what the media does, it paints a broad brush across the whole religion. And that's wrong. So I've been a little disgruntled, even with my own religion, for thinking that, you cannot know God unless you are a Christian. To me, that's not true. Muslims their God, they call him Allah. We call him God. Other religions call him Yahweh. I have no problems with Hindus or Buddhists or Sikhs or, whatever, as long as they don't discriminate against other religions or other people. I'm happy. But right now, we have a lot of religious discrimination in addition to racial discrimination. And that disheartens me.
If you could leave our listeners with one thought about race, hatred, and dialogue, one thing you've learned from a lifetime of walking into rooms you weren't invited into, what would it be?
Okay, a couple things. One, as I stressed several times, I majored in music. I am a musician. I'm just a rock and roll piano player. If I did not major in sociology or psychology, if I can do this as just a regular musician, anybody can do this if they have the passion for it, if they want to see a change. Our society can only become one of two things. One, it can become that which we sit back and watch it become, or two, it can become that which we stand up and make it become. So we all have to ask ourselves the question, do I want to sit back and see what my country becomes, or do I want to stand up and make it become what I want to see? I've chosen my path. Everybody else has to choose their path. I've chosen to stand up and make it become what I want to see. As I said, I'm just one person. But if I can do this, anybody can do it if they follow the methodology. And one way to do that is to pick up my new book. This is my brand new book. It's called The Klan Whisperer. All right? And it just came out 2 days after Christmas. So it's only been out a few months now. And you can get it on Amazon. I talk about all of my experiences with the white supremacist side and how I've gone about and what it was I said in conversations that led people to rethink. So I'm not saying everybody needs to read the book and go out and approach Nazis and Klan people, but it's also helpful for anybody who has a dispute with a coworker or somebody at school or their own family. I get so tired of hearing about people saying, I'm not going to Thanksgiving dinner with my family because my sister voted for Donald Trump and I voted for Joe Biden, or my sister or my father voted for Kamala and I voted for Trump or whatever. Listen, how long have you been with your family? Whoever wins the presidency is only going to be there for a minimum of 4 years, for a maximum of 8 years. How long have you been with your family? Decades. You're going to throw away a family or a friendship decades long over somebody who's only going to be around for a few years? If I can go to a Klan rally and talk to people who hate me, you can sit down at your own dinner table and talk to your sister or your dad or your mom. Come on. Get the book. It will help you out.
Daryl, what do you think about race relations today? It seems like I can't tell if they're, obviously they're way better than they were when you were growing up, but it seems like I can't tell if we've taken a step back because of social media or if social media just makes it seem that way because of the algorithm feeds the kind of anger and divisiveness.
There is definitely an uptick, and our current administration is encouraging that. Okay? There is a demographic shift that is happening in this country. In the year 2042, for the first time in the history of the United States, this country will be 50-50. 50% white, 50% non-white. Between 2045 and 2050, it's going to flip. And for the first time in the history of the United States, white people will become the minority. There are plenty of white people in this country who don't care. They say, hey, no big deal. That doesn't bother me. That's evolution. It happens. But then there's a large slice of our population that does care. And those are the ones that I deal with. And they're very upset about this. And they're trying to stop that. And that's one reason why Donald Trump wants Canada to become the 51st state in order to do this. Okay? So, we should do a part two, and I can go into that. Because I can tell you, I learned this back in 1982 from the then head of the American Nazi Party. So that's how far I go back, and what I've seen progress. We've come a long ways, but we still have a long ways to go. Got it,
Daryl. We're gonna have to do a part two because I want to talk about more of the stuff today. I know we're limited on time.
Now on to our final word segment where we ask our guests a few rapid fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
Playing with Chuck Berry.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
Dealing with racism.
What are you most excited about?
Every day I wake up and see a sunrise.
What advice would you give your high school self?
Don't let other people impose their own limitations upon you. If you have a dream, you go for it.
What book recommendations do you have for us or for the listeners?
It's called The Klan Whisperer, and you can get it on Amazon.com. Brand new. Now, that book, a lot of people have been looking for my first book called Clandestine Relationships, okay? It is now out of print. Some booksellers that still have copies, they jack up the price, unaffordable. Don't worry about getting the first book. Get this book, because this book has the first book within it, plus updates and new stories.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, let's continue the conversation. Call me again.
Daryl, your work is amazing. If people are talking, it's an opportunity to make progress. You have biblical patience and empathy. Thank you for your time today, and God bless.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Daryl, before we let you go, I ask every guest at the end, now that you got to talk to us and kind of know what the podcast is about a little bit, who are a couple people that you know personally that you think we should try to get on the podcast next?
My friend Jeff Scoop. And Jeff Scoop was the former commander of the largest neo-Nazi organization in this country. He was a 27-year member, and for 25 of those 27 years, he led it and made it the largest neo-Nazi organization in this country. Myself and a beautiful lady, Muslim filmmaker named Dia Khan, who's a very good friend of mine and now a very good friend of Jeff's, we were instrumental in influencing him to reconsider his views. And now Jeff has done a complete turnaround. He's an amazing, amazing person. And I think he would provide you with a lot of great insight.
Awesome. That's really good. Thanks so much for your time, like my dad said. And I'm going to follow up with you. We'll do a part 2.
Okay.
Today's episode is brought to you by the ALS Investment Fund, a specialized biotech venture capital investment firm focused on neurodegenerative diseases, particularly ALS. They manage a large and diversified worldwide portfolio of ALS-related companies, collaborating with a global network of scientists, clinicians, foundations, and patient advocates to accelerate therapeutic development, investing for a world without ALS. Discover more about their mission and impact at alsinvestmentfund.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider supporting the podcast for free by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends. Your support means the world to us. This episode of Nothing Left Unsaid is brought to you by 11 Labs. Their groundbreaking technology makes a huge difference, and we're grateful for their support. To learn more, visit 11labs.io. A substantial portion of our sponsorship proceeds go to tackleals.com, funding cutting-edge ALS research. If you'd like to join the fight and contribute, visit tackleals.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on Nothing Left Unsaid.